Defined terms appear throughout all of the AIR forms. As a matter of fact, defined terms are found throughout most legal documents. Defined terms are words or groups of words that have a very specific definition and meaning, and that definition is found somewhere within the document that the defined term appears. In the AIR forms, defined terms are easy to spot. They are words or groups of words where the initial first letter always appears capitalized. Now, defined terms are used to give consistency to the language of a document and also make drafting and reading the document easier. The first time a defined term appears in the AIR documents is where it's defined. You will note the first time that a defined term appears in the AIR forms, it's encapsulated in quotation marks and parentheses and appears in bold. Let's take, for example, the word lessor. It appears in paragraph 1.1 of all the lease forms. Note that it appears encapsulated in quotation marks and parentheses and in bold. Now, you'll also note that before the word lessor is a blank. Now, that blank is for the person preparing the lease to insert the name of the entity or the individual that will be acting as the lessor. Let's say the Main Street LLC. Now, for the balance of the lease, every time the word lessor appears, it is to mean Main Street LLC, not the property management for the lessor, the lessor's attorney, and not the individual who may have executed the lease on behalf of Main Street LLC. Now, there are dozens of references to the lessor in the lease form. Imagine having to fill in Main Street LLC every time a reference was made to the landlord. Well, without defined terms, the preparer of the lease would have to do exactly that, and that would be very cumbersome. There are several sections of the lease where the person preparing the lease provides a definition of a term. For example, base rent, commencement date, term, and security deposit are a few. But there's also several sections of the lease where the AIR provides a definition of a term. Applicable requirement is one such term, and it's defined in paragraph 2.3. It essentially means governmental codes, ordinances, laws, and CC&Rs. So in paragraph 34 of the lease, where the lease requires that all signs comply with applicable requirements, we know we're referring to governmental codes, CC&Rs, laws, and ordinances. Defined terms come in pretty handy when we're drafting addendums or amendments. For example, alteration is another defined term. It's defined in paragraph 7.3, and it essentially means what we commonly refer to as tenant improvements. Now, if I were drafting an addendum, I would not say that the landlord is going to build tenant improvements in compliance with city codes. Rather, I would say that the lessor is going to construct alterations in compliance with applicable requirements. One sentence, three defined terms: lessor, alterations, and applicable requirements. That way, I've kept the language of the addendum consistent with the language of the lease and made drafting it much easier. The AIR Forms User's Manual contains an index and glossary of all the defined terms found in the lease documents and related addenda. It comes in pretty handy when you're drafting amendments or addendums to the lease, or for just understanding the defined terms that appear in the lease documents. So from now on, when you see a word or group of words where the first letter is capitalized in any of the AIR forms, you'll know that that word carries a definite meaning, and that definition is found somewhere in the body of the document. Don't hesitate to contact the AIR with any questions you might have about the use or content of their forms, or to ask about educational seminars that may be available to you. Also, the AIR highly recommends to all parties in a transaction to seek out legal and other professional advice when transacting business using one of their forms. If you liked what you heard today and found it to be helpful, I encourage you to purchase the AIR Forms User's Manual. It's filled with hundreds of similar tips, and ordering information will follow at the end of the video. Thank you.